Welcome to the show. It is Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling. He's Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. I thought I heard something buzzing in my room right when we started. I lost power at my house earlier today, but fortunately it's back. It was out for a couple of hours. I was kind of worried about how things were going to go, if I was going to have enough juice in the batteries between the hot spot in the phone and the computer to make this show happen. But as you can see, the lights are on and things are going well. How are things in the land today, Jesse?
Oh, it's not bad. It's like 78 degrees, really sunny and nice outside. I think it's probably been the most beautiful day of the summer. Work-wise, it was work. Some people made me upset, but that's every day.
Work-wise, it was work. Yes. Yes, it was. It was work. Well, glad to have you with us here today. Smash that like button if you would, and of course, subscribe, rate, review, all that kind of good stuff that we always talk about. It is the middle of May. Did a little mowing today. It was long overdue at my yard. I think Vince mowed his after the show yesterday, but spring football is more and more a distant memory now at this point as we kind of start to grind our way towards the summer. We're just a couple of weeks away from Memorial Day, and the off season for college football, it's a lot different than the NFL because there's just not a ton that happens. Like the NFL, of course, has the draft combine, they've got free agency. There's tons of build up to the draft, the actual draft itself. We just had the schedule release, all that different kind of stuff. They pretty much dominate the calendar, because there's just always something going on in the NFL.
Yeah, and that's really how it goes once the college football season ends. Is it just kind of takes the back seat to the NFL, like you were talking about. I think the NFL is better about strategically doing things to keep fans interested, even though it's technically a lull in the season, and college football really, doesn't do a whole lot. And the fact of, unless you follow your team for, spring practice and everything, which I don't think a lot of people do / get overly excited about. There's really just not a lot to look forward to when it comes to the college football offseason.
Yeah, and college offseason the last couple of years has pretty much come down to conference realignment. 2 years ago it was Texas and Oklahoma. I see Henry agrees. That their move to the SEC last summer, we got the bombshell that it was USC and UCLA going to head to the Big Ten, and those moves, of course, are still not pending, but they're coming in the near future. And the rumblings right now are all this stuff going on in ACC land with the president's meeting out there. There are now 8 schools from the conference. Louisville became the 8th school apparently today to join this fray with these 7 other schools: Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina State, and the 2 Virginia schools, Virginia and Virginia Tech. They've met with their lawyers over the past several months to examine how the ACC's grant of rights that runs through 2036, just how unbreakable it is. And, it would reportedly cost around $120 million per school to get out of it. So those schools reportedly pitching that there should be a weighted payout. They want a weighted payout from the conference to pay them more than the other schools because they think that they're bringing in more revenue than the others. So I don't feel like anything is going to happen with this. I saw just before we got started, there's some stuff on Twitter about the whole Louisville thing. A lot of people equate this to, well, these 7 schools are now 8. These 8 schools, they're all in this together and they're going to bolt. But the problem is still the problem, and that's, you've got to pay the grant of rights. The grant of rights, they've signed contracts that run for another 13 years. And if you try to get out of them, well, you can go someplace else, but you've got to pay the penalty, $120 million to get out of this. And like that's what kept Texas and Oklahoma, and for that matter, USC and UCLA in their conferences for a little bit longer. Like they would have had to pay a penalty fee to get out of them. So they've stuck around for an extra couple years playing in those conferences. And it's just, I don't see the ACC breaking up anytime soon because it's just going to cost everybody too much money. They'd have to pay more than they're going to get in the long haul. And the other part of that is like, with the exception of Clemson and Florida State, maybe North Carolina, I don't really see how desirable all these schools are for like the SEC or, maybe for the Big 12 because the Big 12 is desperate enough. So I don't think anything is happening anytime soon. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you, and I think it's just for what you were talking about. They're contractually obliged or obligated right now, and you can't. $120 million is a lot of money just to leave the conference, and so you would be rolling the dice that you would be comfortable with going in the hole $120 million, and then essentially having to probably work off some of those debts for a few years before you even start seeing any sort of, turn profits or anything like that. So it's like, I think it would be easier and maybe more practical for, the Clemsons, the Florida States, maybe Miami and North Carolina, but like North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Louisville, I just don't see enough interest, nationally. They don't have enough of a national presence where they could undertake $120 million hole. It's not worth it. And I think it's honestly a waste of a lot of people's time and breath because this is something that's going to last for 13 more years and it's not going to change really, in my opinion. So I just feel like it's a lot of wasted effort into something that really isn't going to change.
Well, and the other thing is like, even if some of these schools, let's say Clemson, for example, were to go, let's say that they were to pay them on a sliding scale, they'd only be getting a few more $1,000,000. You're talking about probably like $3 to $5 million per year that they would be getting. Is it really worth that to just cause the ripple effect that you would cause and the discord that you would cause throughout the conference to get a couple extra $1,000,000? I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, they want closer to 100 million, like they're getting in the SEC, than the around 30 million bucks. And that's, Andre says, that's why you have alumni to help pay the cost. I just, I mean, you're gonna be digging deep to get 120 million. 120 million. It's one thing to buy out a football coach's contract for 5 or 10 million bucks. 120 million bucks is a whole different
I just feel
story.
like that money could be used in so many better ways just to get out of a contract. I mean, you're talking about maybe seeing an extra 3 to 5 extra, million per year. You say you take the top end of that 5 million, divide, take 120 divided by 5, and that's 24 years of making it up before you see a net profit, essentially. So I don't see the advantage of it. And honestly, to me, I think it comes down to, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's just everyone wants that new TV deal and to get more money out of it. But it's just, that's the whole point of a contract, unfortunately, is you sign people and you get them in long term. And of course, better things are going to come out, right? Like I bought a car 5 years ago and I just paid off the loans or whatever. But during that time, they had better cars out and but that doesn't mean I can just bolt to the newest car and immediately get rid of what I have. It's not
Still
practical.
have to pay it off. That's right. It's something has to be paid off in between. And cars at least are easier to pay off than 120 million bucks like we're talking
Right.
about. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You can't just say, well, now I'm going to jump to the next one. You got to find a way to pay for it.
Always jump to the newest, greatest thing because there's always going to be a newer or greater thing. And so, unfortunately, the ACC really screwed themselves over by binding themselves to such a long-term deal. And I think that is ultimately their downfall, is they can't get out of their own mistakes.
Yeah, and that's like Jim Phillips is paying the cost of his predecessor right now. I mean, he's only been on the job there for a couple of years, and this deal was signed well before he showed up. And the thing is, they signed this in 2016, and everyone was patting them on the back for signing this. All the schools were happy because, like, they took a long-term deal. They took long-term security over let's do a shorter deal and maybe in a few years we get a bigger payout there. So they were all willing to do it. Each and every school had to sign on the dotted line that that's, the agreement that they were going to abide by. And now because there's shinier, newer things going on in the SEC and in the Big Ten, all these schools, they're looking for greener pastures. So I just because 7 or 8 schools are banding together, that doesn't mean things are falling apart. They're not going to go anywhere because they're not. At best, you might get 1 or 2 schools who would actually be willing to eat this. And the fact that they're trying to band together really shows where they are. Because again, like what they're trying to press right now is we know we can't get out of this. So pay us a little bit more because we think that we're worth more than, some
Well,
of
I
these other
think
schools
that
like the Pittsburgh and the Boston colleges of the ACC.
I think that like you were saying, there's probably only 2 desirable schools, Florida State and Clemson. And I think a lot of these more middle tier schools are latching or leeching onto them, knowing that there is interest in them, and then just kind of group trying to get out of it. But really, outside of Florida State and Clemson, I don't think anyone else could ultimately afford to go into the hole like that. I think Clemson and Florida State could make it work over time. But I just think that, and again, too, even if you do it, you're putting yourself in the hole and banking on something happening that you can't even guarantee, going forward. So you might go in the hole and it could end up being even worse and you could go even more in the hole. So
yeah,
I just think it's a bad situation overall for some of these ACC teams. And like you said, they just signed, that new deal 7 years ago, a 20-year deal. They're not even halfway through this new deal and they're already trying to get out of it.
Yeah, exactly. So in the meantime, other than conference realignment talk, is there a way for college football to grab some different space in the offseason calendar the way the NFL does with its offseason? And what got me thinking about this, there was a recent article from Michael DeCourcy of the Sporting News, and he says what he said was, now he applied Michael DeCourcy, traditionally college basketball writer, much more on the college basketball side. So he says college basketball should embrace the transfer portal and use it to promote the sport like the NFL, the NBA, and Major League Baseball do with their free agent periods to create more off-season buzz, more off-season conversation. And I think it's easily adaptable to college football, especially since there's much greater overall interest compared to college basketball. So what do you think about just like that as a starting point for the concept when you talk about, college football and the off-season and sort of having more things going on, like more interest in the off season beyond everything blowing up when when all the conversation shifts to realignment.
Yeah, and so we kind of talked about this at the beginning. College football, once the season ends, the national championship bowl game, wherever your team might end up, it's basically a dead period until the start of the next school year. As because not too many people are concerned about the weightlifting programs and the training that go on from January to March. And then
Right.
very, very few are interested in actual spring practice because of what we talked about before. It's just very vanilla stuff. It's mainly for the younger guys so they can learn and understand the defense, get a better understanding of the playbook, yada, yada, yada. But I like the overall idea of college football being able to do something. And I like, the conversation that was started by Michael DeCourcy, because what you can essentially do is take everyone in the transfer portal and make it like every other major sports league's trade deadline, have maybe do like a full rankings of 1 through 100, the top 100 players in the transfer portal, and then
Yeah.
do something like we've talked about before, like do a transfer portal game or a transfer portal combine or something like that, and then allow people to watch, allow people to take interest, and then it almost becomes like a lottery because then you're like, oh well, I want this guy on my team, or maybe we're deficient at cornerback. Who's the best cornerback in the portal right now? Oh, let me tune in and see how they're doing, and people like you and I are talking about him. So then it gives people even more interest to tune in and look at him. But I think there is a very solid idea of doing something with the transfer portal, now that it's such a big thing, and the amount of people that are in the transfer portal, that you can easily turn it into some sort of rankings, combine, football game, whatever it might be. And you can drag that out or pull it out, as much as you can and get as much out of it, once the college football season ends.
Well, and there are a couple of different windows, obviously. There's the December window when the portal opens, and then it closes again because you've got the spring semester starting in January. And then obviously you have the spring portal when it opens in April and then it closes. And now, just like we had with Antonio Carter, a guy who announced that he's transferring in, like you've got the two portal windows. And like you said, so you've really got two different opportunities there to use it, just like you're talking about. Like these are the time, because most of the time spent talking about the portal is like what happened here at Notre Dame. Tyler Buckner, Logan Diggs, Prince Collie. It's like, everybody wrings their hands because your guys are transferring. But what if there were actually more attention on the guys who are available out there? Because that information is a lot more difficult to come by in a lot of ways. It's like you make that more readily available so fans can kind of see what's out there. I think that leads to a lot, broader conversation. And then like you're talking about, like comparing that to the free agency period, that's essentially what the transfer portal is now. Like it or not, you may not completely love it, but it is what it is. And so it has become, whether it's college football or college basketball, obviously other sports as well, but they're the two most high profile sports. It is the free agency period for those sports. So why not use that to actually generate more off-season conversation and conversation that people are interested in the off-season? Everyone wants to bolster their team.
Well, yeah, and I think everyone wants to improve, and I think it's just such an advantage for these guys going in the portal too, because when they've committed, and basically what I'm saying is, coming out of high school compared to when they decide to transfer, their bodies are in different shapes, whether they're faster, stronger, their football IQ, you would hope, is up, just understanding the way college football is played, just football IQ in general. So it goes both ways. It not only helps the fans, but it helps the players because they can put on a more accurate display of who they are in the current moment, right? Because you don't want to just rely on the 24/7 sports composite grade that they got 2 years ago when there's not a lot of game film out. You want to see what they are in their current state. And I think that is also something that's beneficiary to coaches, players, fans. Like, everyone would benefit from that overall, because you're getting a more updated scouting report essentially, and the players are able to showcase, okay, maybe they've gotten better, and in some cases, I'm sure maybe some people have gotten worse, but I think it's fair for the coaches to know, where that player stands in their current state.
So I've got kind of some ideas for this reimagined college football offseason. And this is one of the things, how we fit it in there. The first thing I would do is take the high school early signing period out of the month of December, because there's just too much going on there at that point. You've got some teams are getting ready for bowls. Of course, you got coaching changes going on, and and you've got the transfer portal going on at that time. I think that it is too much. Get the early signing period out of December. I would move that to the last week of July, right before fall training camps start. So what do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I would also get rid of the early signee period, because again, what you talk about, there's so much going on, like too many moving parts at the time. And I would take it a step further. And I don't know if this is kind of same along the same lines, but I would get rid of the early transfer portal as well, because again, like we saw someone like Drew Pine enter the transfer portal before the season was even over. And I've stuck by that. I think that the transfer portal should only open once your season is, officially over. And I know that is different times for different players, but I think you should hold everyone to the same transfer portal opening date. And that should be after the last game of the very last game of the season, essentially the national championship. So
see, and that what makes that difficult though is the fact that, like, starting next year, especially, the national championship game isn't going to be played until January 20th, and you've got classes already starting around that point. So you're
Oh,
going to
that's
have
true
some
because it's the
people,
change of the semester.
right? Like, see, classes are going to start in mid-January in most places. So it's like, again, it stinks, but you kind of have to have that portal right there. You've got to have that portal open period, I think, just because of that. You've got to give those guys an opportunity if they want to transfer then and find a new school so they can get enrolled for the spring semester and go through spring practice. So I think I mean, I agree. It does, like, the timing of it stinks, just like the timing of coaching changes always stink. But I kind of think that you've got to keep that window in there someplace. So, like, with that in mind, the 12-team college football playoff is going to start. The first round games are going to be December 20th and 21st, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, quarterfinals, January 9th and 10th. This is not this season, but next season, of course. January 9th and 10th, the semifinals, January 20th, the national championship. So, what I would do is put the winter portal signing day right after those New Year's Eve games. So like you could obviously be committed and all that stuff, but you have like the formal portal winter signing day right after New Year's, the quarterfinals, and all that, and in between the semifinals, because there are only four teams that are going to be playing at that point. So the vast majority of schools, would be free. It would allow everyone, to make a bigger deal about the announcements. And then, kind of like you said, if people are talking about these players who are kind of in there, the portal in the meantime, I think that is a good opportunity. You like that?
Yeah, I also do like this one. And again, I like it for a lot of the stuff that you were talking about because I think it gives the schools a bigger opportunity to give these kind of portal situations more publicity, right? Like you can, especially if your season has kind of ended and maybe it didn't end in the way you wanted to, you can make a splash and kind of get people's minds off of the topic of maybe not having the season that you quite expected by saying, hey, we just got this great transfer portal player. Here we are, we're signing them. And this is how they're going to address our needs or some of our deficiencies, from the previous season. So I really like that. I think it would obviously suck for the teams who are still in the playoffs, because that would just be another thing that they have to go about. But I mean, the majority of the schools aren't in the playoffs, and that's kind of the point of it. And obviously a reason why you'd probably be looking more so into the portal. So I think it would be great because it gives it just diverts the attention away from what was probably not a great season, and you immediately kind of be like, okay, well,
You
we know
get
we had
some
a
new
bad
juice.
season, yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, here's some new juice of how we're going to turn it around and get people
Yeah.
excited for how you're going to turn it around.
Yeah, again, the analogy is free agency for the pro sports, and it's like these are our free agents that we've these are our transfer portal guys, our free agents that we've added this offseason, going into the spring. And obviously they had a bit, like Notre Dame had a big one in Sam Hartman. And so yeah, I absolutely. I think that it makes absolute sense. I would keep the regular high school signing day in February the way that it's always been, but again, I've already taken the early signing period out of December because of everything else going on. So now, like, once you get into February, though, February, March, April, that's like spring practice, obviously. The only thing I can think of is like you've got some of these different, you always hear about like these NCAA oversight committees, like the rules committees. They're looking at these different rules, and it seems like you hear about them, but it is mostly just through, like sources tell, the Athletic or SI or whoever, like this is what's going on, or maybe you get like an official release at some point from the NCAA, like this is what we're studying. These are the potential rules changes and stuff like that. Like, how about if there's a little bit more transparency from the NCAA and they actually stand up, actually hold like a press conference or, some kind of forum or something like that. There's not a whole lot else that I can really think of for March and April for college football other than like those kind of things. Maybe it's a little bit stuffy, but if there's actually someone up there talking, officially about it? Like, I don't know. So what do you think? March and April. What do you do during that period other than spring practice?
So I think what would make the most sense is I feel like each team, and this is kind of along the lines of spring practice. So maybe I'm just stretching this out or a little too far fetched, but I would like each head coach to kind of do, how they do like preseason conference meetings where all the coaches kind of get together and
Right.
before the start of the season. I think that would be something interesting to possibly look at the beginning of the spring and kind of have some sort of national media day where a lot of the coaches get together and you essentially just kind of talk about, the changeover that you saw from the end of the season to the start of the spring, what you potentially kind of lost, what you potentially added, and then what you're looking at, as your goals in the spring season. I know a lot of them would be generic because a lot of this, a lot of the spring goals are the same, but I still think you could do a lot to get out at a national level of saying, hey, this is what we, lacked in last season, or this is what we lost, and then maybe this is what we were good at last season, and this is what we've gained, and how, what the vision is kind of going forward and what you're going to do in the spring to maybe, sort of accomplish some of these minor goals in terms of setting yourself up for the fall.
Yeah, I think that, like all the schools obviously do their own press conferences kicking
Right.
off spring, but like you're doing this again to bring the conversation on a little bit more national level. And it doesn't have to be the same group of coaches every time. You can pull like a handful of coaches from each conference or, whatever it happens to be. I think that there are some interesting things that you could do for that because again, you're talking about pushing college football up sort of into the national conversation, just like, because essentially from the time the Super Bowl ends until the draft, it is all about the draft for the NFL. And that kind of comes and goes in waves, and so I think that would be another opportunity for college football to kind of get themselves out there. So you've got more going on. And like you could do like one group before the spring, another group after the spring.
Yeah.
And I think that would be fairly easy to do, really, because, now obviously what's coming out of spring. Now you're talking about the things that you accomplished and how your new transfers looked and all that kind of stuff. And then by the end of the
What you're
spring,
maybe still looking to add out of the
yeah,
transfer portal.
exactly. Exactly. And because then at the end of at the end of spring, at the end of April, then you've got another transfer portal going on. Like you've got the another transfer window. But I really think that the NCAA, like they were never transparent when Mark Emmert was in charge, and they've got a new head of the NCAA right now. And it was all just cloak and dagger stuff, never accountable. I think that it would be good for them to kind of be a little bit more forward facing in front of the camera and
No, I think
like get
that
out there.
I think the NCAA should have almost like a town hall or like a state of the union type situation where they talk about the state of the NCAA. What rule changes that happen, what they're hoping to accomplish out of the rule changes, what they're hoping, what they're going to enforce more this season, what they're looking to, enforce more this season, stuff like that. I think that it should be like a quarterly type situation, and specifically for college football, that quarter should come up right after maybe the spring season ends, and then kind of leading into obviously the start of the season in the fall. But I do think that there should be the NCAA giving more transparency, and like I said, some sort of town hall address, State of the Union address, where they're just
Right.
talking about overall what they accomplished, what they're hoping to accomplish, things that maybe didn't go quite their way, how they're going to fix those things. I think that is ultimately something that could easily be done. It's just the NCAA doesn't want to have to answer to anyone but themselves.
Yeah, that's typically the way that goes. Andre asks if we think that they should just have one signing day and one transfer portal that would last a month. The problem with the one transfer portal is, again, you've got two different entry points because you've got if you took the like the part of the winter portal out and you made them wait until after the season ends, then you're going to, if you're going to take away their like Sam Hartman, for example. You would take away a Sam Hartman's opportunity potentially to enroll in the spring and be here throughout the spring and get all those practices in with the team. And then you obviously can't not do it after the spring as well. So I think really you have to have the two portal dates open because of that. You've got to give those guys the opportunity who want to transfer at semester to be able to transfer at semester. They can get enrolled, join their new team, go through spring practice. And then you also need to give those guys the opportunity at the end of spring who kind of find out their place in the pecking order. Guys like a Prince Kali, for example, or Tyler Buckner, who are saying, look, it's not going to happen for me here. I need to enter the portal now so I can go find another opportunity. So I really think you've got to keep the two portal dates open, don't you?
Yeah, because I do think it is the most fair to the player at the end of the day. And that's ultimately, what I think the overall goal is with the portal and everything that's, has kind of come out of the portal is just oftentimes players shouldn't feel stuck where they're at. And if there's a better fit for them or an opportunity for them to make it to the next level or live out as much of their, playing days as possible, I'm all for that. I don't believe that any player should feel like they're held hostage. And there's just certain situations too where, you're kind of told a lot of stuff and then you step on campus, you're signed, you're going to practice, and it just doesn't pan out the way that you thought it would. And again, I just don't feel like anyone should feel trapped in their current situation.
Now, the two signing days, like the high school signing days, Salty says, and again, Andre was asking, should there only be one? There used to be only one. It was in February. Like Salty says, he doesn't mind two signing days, but the early one should be prior to the start of the season, not a month earlier than the NIL or NLI day. It would be done with early. I definitely, like I said, I would move the early signing period to the last month of July, right before the season starts. That's when I would put it. Maybe you could even put it in August, even though coaches are going to be, busy, with their fall camps and all that stuff. And the players are going to be busy with their own practices and getting their season started. The high school players, like if you pushed it into August, that's why I like July. Do it before everyone, really kind of gets ramped up and gets busy. Do you think there needs to be two different signing periods? Could you do it with just one? I still think that there's a benefit in having a second one just for guys, maybe after going through, who are either unsure or go through their season and maybe, some commitments aren't firm, but then after everyone, after the early guys get signed, that gives everyone, kind of like the portal thing, it gives everyone more of an idea of what is still needed and, maybe where some opportunities are. I don't know. Do you think there need to be two signing periods or signing dates, I guess, for the high school guys?
I do like the two signing days for the high school kids because I still think that, I mean, there's just a lot. I think for some kids, there's a lot of uncertainty when there's a lot of interest in you, and so knowing whether or not you made the right decision, and then ultimately too, to kind of selfishly, I feel like it's okay or reasonable for the players to kind of see where some of these other guys went. Like, why would I go to a school as a running back when they just signed 4 running backs in the earlier signing period, right? Like you're only kind of burying yourself on a depth chart on your own. So just because of those reasons, like I said, I think a lot of these younger kids have so much pressure on them and they're still so young and feeling like they have to make the right decision. And then also seeing, kind of where things stack up roster wise, I think it's perfectly okay to have 2 signing days.
Yeah. I guess the question is where to put them. And it's like, there seems to be more talk about just doing away with the early signing period as opposed to moving it. I think you talk, like some of the coaches we've talked to, like July seems to be a good time. Like to put it. Like Salty was saying, July and March as the two periods, and like I wouldn't have a problem with that at all. Either one. I mean, you'd only be moving it a couple of weeks if you moved it off February for the second one. So I still think that there is a benefit to the second one, but again, I don't think that the early signing period needs to be in December because of all the other stuff with the transfer portal now and with coaches movement and getting ready for bowl games. I don't think the early signing period needs to be in December. There's just too much other stuff going on right now.
Yeah, and I agree. And I just think as long as it's before the semester starts, that's the ultimate goal because of what Derek kind of brought up is you have early enrollees. And I think that is like that makes the perfect sense for that signing period because these guys 100% know where they want to go, right? Like so that's like the whole reason why you early enroll is you're probably a stud and you know you're going to be, challenging for a spot kind of right away and you know for sure where you want to go. But that's not the case with everyone. Not everyone's a 5-star stud and not everyone has the ability to just be wanted and desired by so many schools. I think the later signing period helps people kind of find their better fit for the guys who maybe are, your 2 or 3 star, not as highly known as your 5 stars that oftentimes are gonna commit early and sign early because again they know that they're a stud, they know that they're going to start competing right away in spring practice, and they know that they want to go to whatever school they want to go to. That's just not the case for everyone. So I think the second signing day really benefits those players.
Well, like Derek says, early enrollees need the early signing period. There's got to be some kind of early signing period. I guess technically there doesn't have to be because, like you could still sign whenever you want, but, like the way they used to do it with the early enrollees is like the official signing day wasn't until February, but they couldn't talk officially about the guys would be on campus for a month and nobody could talk officially about them, even though they were already enrolled in school and part of the team and everything else. So maybe there technically doesn't have to be, but it sure does seem like it makes a lot more sense to have an early period. So the other thing, Salty was saying, transfer portal should be a week after the draft and close on Memorial Day. And I'm kind of in the same ballpark on that. We talked about, I think it was last week, first week of May, do a transfer portal camp, combine, whatever you want to call it. Like players who haven't committed yet, go to a Senior Bowl type event, even if it's just, for like 3 or 4 days, like spend the weekend there, you work out with some different coaches, and then you can televise some of the stuff like the NFL does with its combine. And we talked about this yesterday. Something like 70% of the players in the portal have not actually played for the schools that they started out at. So like there are a lot of guys who don't have any film other than practice film. And if you're, former Colorado guy, Deion Sanders isn't going to let anybody see your practice film. So I think there's a benefit in having some kind of event like this in early May, get some of these guys some exposure. And then mid-May or the end of May, you do a spring transfer portal signing date. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I am all aboard on that. And again, the reason why I'm so about it is because it's centered around kind of like the transfer portal showdown, allowing these players in the transfer portal the opportunity to basically go out there and have their own sort of combine and, give live feedback results to a lot of these coaches to see where, majority of them stand. So I think that is one of your better ideas in a long time.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Take a compliment any way I can get it. So
unlike your Friday's excursion, that was not
Friday's excursion. What are you talking about?
Or yesterday's, sorry. Whatever.
Oh, yeah. We don't have to get into that.
Right.
All right. So then that takes us through May. And now we're getting to June. And of course, the calendar closes in June when the College World Series ends. Here's what I would do, because again, like you've got with the NFL, you've got all this buildup with schedule release and all that kind of stuff. And, they kind of slow release some of the stuff. They leak some stuff out a couple days in advance of the actual schedule being done. Yeah, right back at you, Derek. But you can't really do that in college football because the schedules, so much of them are put together so far in advance. but you've got the TV schedules, like something that's been happening in this last week or so. Like last week, NBC announced Penn State and West Virginia was going to be their first primetime game on NBC. I think it was yesterday it came out. Ohio State, Michigan State are going to be a November 11th primetime game on NBC. The networks, when they figure out what these schedules are going to be, they do their own draft of these games. Like they literally draft these games. You know, like Fox gets first pick, for example, then NBC would get a pick, CBS would get a pick. You know, ESPN obviously in there for whatever they have the rights to. So what if, like in early June, rather than this kind of you release a game here, you release a game there over the course of a couple weeks, what if they did, you know, like a TV draft of, you know, the networks,
the top games of the year.
Yeah, drafting the top games of the year, and it's like they're all doing that. You know, they can all do like their own version, just like ESPN and NFL Network do their own thing. Like you could do this stuff on ESPN or Fox Sports, and you know, you got a million different streamers and stuff like that. What do you think about that? Like the TV draft for the prime time, or the, you know, the big college football games of the year.
Yeah, I know I would be interested. I don't know how much you could get interest on a national level, but overall, I think the concept is really sound because again, it fills a void of dead time, and it would be cool to see, you know, how important these networks, you know, view your school essentially, like Notre Dame, USC, Notre Dame, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. Like those would probably all be top 10, you know, at the very least games
Right.
that you could probably almost go top 5 just because of the national presence that Notre Dame has. And so I think that doing something like that just kind of adds more to the rivalries, right? Like it gives the games even more hype, seeing that it was the most
Right.
anticipated game of the year, essentially.
Well, and then like NBC and some of these other networks, for that matter, they can say, here's what's going to be, you know, like for example, that Penn State West Virginia game is going to be the same day Notre Dame plays Tennessee State. So like NBC could say, well, you know, not that the Tennessee State is obviously a big marquee game, but they could say, here's our doubleheader for that day. And there are plenty of other Saturdays like that where NBC can now say, here's what our, you know, Notre Dame Big Ten primetime doubleheaders are going to look like throughout the season. Or, you know, Fox, here's what our big noon kickoff is, and here's what we've got. Like there's a lot of different stuff I think that they can do there. And then like Notre Dame and the other schools as well can start announcing some of these game times. And someone was just asking, any idea what the Notre Dame Navy kickoff in Ireland will be? Haven't heard it yet, which seems weird considering it's going to start the season and it's going to be in Ireland. Like you would think that we would know. I would imagine it's going to be probably somewhere around noon our time, because I think that they're like 5 hours ahead of us. So that would be 5 o'clock Ireland time, would be noon Eastern time, you know, maybe a little bit, you know, kind of in that window would be my guess. But as of right now, we don't know. Derek says only the Clemson game is not already on NBC. I'm not really following what you mean.
Since those are home games, they are automatically on NBC. Clemson being the away game, it'd be the only one not on NBC.
Well, yeah,
but
I mean, yeah,
you could make it like a package deal. Here's our, you know,
right.
Notre Dame doubleheader on NBC today.
Right. Obviously, there's not going to be a doubleheader every week, but they could announce the ones that they know are going to be doubleheaders. And I thought I saw something today about Notre Dame Clemson is going to be on ABC. I don't know if that was official or not, but I did see kind of something about that. But again, like there's a lot of, and some of those things are not determined until once the season gets started. As we well know, when Notre Dame goes on the road, you know, there's always those windows that they put them in to determine, you know, what time, what channel assignment, you know, which network and all that different kind of stuff. But pretty much we know when Notre Dame is on the road, it's going to end up on the mouse someplace. It's just a matter of, you know, which mouse it's going to be. Now they go out West, that's going to change now because I believe that, well, Pac-12 is still working out their contract, so I won't even go there. But anyway, just kind of some ideas of some different things. I think that there's some different ways that college football could go, to kind of be a bigger part of the conversation. Maybe it's selfish because it helps us have something to talk about in the offseason. But I just feel like there are a lot of different things that they could be doing to grab more national conversation in the offseason than what they're doing right now. And I also think that there are some things that kind of need to be worked around.
Yeah, and I think that it is definitely a fun kind of subject to talk about because ultimately there's no wrong answer because they don't do anything right now. So you're just basically kind of throwing ideas out there of what you believe would as a fan give you even more interest of what you're doing. And I know it's a lot maybe easier for people like us who are, always fans and kind of always looking at stuff kind of year round. But you got to think of more of like the casual fans um, who would love to maybe tune in and, like you said, see who Notre Dame's going in to get in the transfer portal, to see who Notre Dame is going to play on what network and how important it is on a national level to everyone else, or just moving around things overall to just have a more streamlined interest throughout the duration of the off season.
Right. All right, Jesse, we've beat up the off season long enough. Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am. I have been looking forward to it all day, actually.
All right. The
Sometimes
list
I don't even read the rapid fire questions. That way I can just give you my off the top, just gut
right off the
response.
cuff.
Yeah.
Just go, baby. All right. Well, just this afternoon, we found out former Notre Dame running back Logan Diggs has announced he's transferring to LSU. What do you think of that choice?
I don't think that's a surprise at all. I think that is, if you ask most people, that was probably the top landing spot, and I think it makes sense because he was recruited under the BK regime, and obviously there is interest, from BK. I think it helps LSU. It's definitely not a negative thing. I think what's more interesting to me is it shows the state of Notre Dame and its roster. When you're talking about Alabama plucked Notre Dame's backup quarterback, LSU plucked Notre Dame's backup running back, and I guess you could make the case that he was splitting time, with Estime, but Diggs moved to wide receiver. There were other guys kind of working up the depth chart, Jabron Payne, and I always forget the other guy's name. But basically, what I'm getting at is if you're a Notre Dame fan, and then of course the wide receiver going over, Styles
Chris
going
Tyree.
over to
Oh,
Ohio
Styles going to
State,
Ohio State.
a
Yeah.
guy that was 4th or 5th on Notre Dame's depth chart, wide receiver going over to Ohio State. I think it shows, at least to me, that we should feel good about the state of Notre Dame's roster if these other schools, quote unquote, big time national contenders, are kind of plucking some of these, these backups essentially of Notre Dame. So I think it shows overall really good strength of Notre Dame's roster, and I feel even more confident in what Marcus Freeman is building if other big name schools have to go after some of these guys that are depth pieces essentially.
Yeah, they're not transferring down to MAC schools or, Ohio Valley or wherever it happens to be. No offense to any of them because everybody gets offended by something these days, including our fans down in LSU, apparently, who, like, even though Antonio Carter totally snubbed LSU, they're still mad to hear that he snubbed LSU, apparently. But, like, LSU's getting a good running back, and he's from Louisiana. There was some back and forth for him coming out of high school. Was he going to go to LSU? Was he going to come to Notre Dame? He came to Notre Dame, decided apparently that, at least part of his decision was wanting to be closer to home. So he's going to get closer to home. They're going to get a good running back now, and the thing is, he's probably going to be splitting just as much time down there at LSU as he was splitting here at Notre Dame with Audric Estime because they've got a pretty good running back coming back. Josh Williams was their top running back last year, their second leading rusher after their quarterback, Jaden Daniels. He was their leading running back rusher, but Daniels led the Tigers in rushing last year. So he's still going to split some time. Like you said, it's not like they're, losing these guys to chumps. Yeah, as Derek says, like Jacob Lacey went to Oklahoma as well. Like these guys are in demand. They've been commodities. Now, there are some other guys out there who are lower on the depth chart for Notre Dame who haven't gone to as big of schools, and in many cases, at least in some of the cases, haven't landed anywhere yet. Hopefully, they do end up soon. Maybe if they had a portal combine right now, they'd be able to, get some more eyes on them. But, hopefully it works out well for Logan Diggs. But again, like from his future perspective, I think he's going to be splitting just as much time down there in Baton Rouge as he was up here at Notre Dame.
Yeah. It's just he'll be a little bit closer to home.
Yep. Do you buy or sell that having Marcus Freeman as head coach increases the value for Notre Dame in its next apparel deal?
Oh, this is 100% a buy, because we're talking about, at Notre Dame, what's the most popular, sought after sport? It's football. Okay. Who's the head coach of the football team? A young 30-something-year-old man that is, I will say it, an attractive guy. And anytime he seems to put on any sort of apparel, everyone rushes to figure out what it is and where they can get it. And so when you put all those things together, I definitely think that having Marcus Freeman as your head coach only increases your value and what you can get out of an apparel deal.
I mean, at the very least, he's added value. So it might not be like, well, Marcus Freeman's our head coach, so we need an
he's not like
$2 million.
the main selling point, but he definitely adds something to it.
Exactly. Like I said, at the very least, it's added value. But at the same time, kind of like what the man is a walking billboard. Every Notre Dame game is on national TV, and whatever he's wearing is going to be seen by millions every week. And then for that matter, like the stuff that he wears at practice gets photographed, and people see those photos and they're like, where can I get the sweatshirt that Marcus Freeman is wearing? Or he goes up to the podium at the press conferences and it's, where can I get, the hoodie or the vest or, whatever, that new shirt that Marcus Freeman is wearing. It's in high demand by the fan base. And quite frankly, I don't think it's been capitalized on enough by Under Armour. Like even pre Marcus Freeman, like a lot of this stuff that we, you'll see Marcus Freeman wearing isn't even for sale in the bookstore in many cases yet. Now, from what I've heard, they try to float stuff out and experiment and see what's popular and stuff like that. But, it's something the NFL has down to a science. Like pre-2000s or so, the NFL, like coaches would still wear their suit and tie and all that different stuff, but they wore whatever they wanted. But now the NFL rolls out the new gear, and as soon as they roll it out, players and coaches are wearing it on the sideline, and then you watch the game, and guess what? People buy it. Like, I don't know how many times that's happened. Everyone on the sideline is a walking billboard, and Marcus Freeman is easily one of the 10 most recognizable people in college football, I think, right now, especially coaches. But he's young, photogenic, in shape. He wears the trendy stuff, all that stuff. So I agree with you. Like, I think that there is a lot of value that he brings to whoever ends up with a new apparel deal than, just like some middle-aged guy wearing khakis and a windbreaker out there. So I've got some spreads on some of Notre Dame's games this season. They're currently favored by 21.5 in the season opener against Navy, 8.5-point underdog against Ohio State, and a 1-point favorite at home against USC. So if you're going to make a 3-leg parlay on those three props, which way are you going to bet?
I would bet 3 legs. I would bet on them not to cover the spread against Navy. I would bet on them to cover the spread against Ohio State. And then I would bet on them to cover the spread against USC. So USC, I would say that, yes, I would take that 1-point favorite and say that they would cover and win by more than 1 point. Against Ohio State, I would take the 8.5 and say, okay, even if they're to lose, I don't think that they lose by more than 8.5 points. And then I just don't see them beating Navy by more than 22. It's the first game of the year. Notre Dame Notre Dame always struggles against covering the spread against teams that they should. And so, yeah, that would be my 3-leg parlay. Just to get it out there one more time, I don't think they cover 21 against Navy. I think they cover against Ohio State, and I think that they cover against USC.
Derek posted something about 14 and a half. I'm double checking all my lines here. And no, all my lines are still correct. So it's 21 and a half against Navy, 8.5 underdog against Ohio State. And I'm with you on the Navy game. I'm just scared by that 21 and a half, mostly because what they won by just 3 points last year. But then, like, you go back the 3 meetings before that, the average margin of victory was almost 4 touchdowns. But then you had last year. And the other side of it, though, is the last time they opened the season against Navy was the last Ireland game. They won that game by 40 points. So, like, how much different is it when you open up the season against them versus doing it in the middle of the season when you have 1 week to prepare? And Navy's got a new head coach coming in as well. I typically stay away from the big spreads like that. The fact that they were 7-6 against the spread last season doesn't help. So I agree with you. I would not lay the points for Notre Dame, the 21 and a half. I would go the other way with that with Navy, but I like them plus 8.5 against Ohio State. I like them -1 at home against USC.
So we essentially said the same thing. I think if you could take it a step further, if you wanted just to money line all three, I'd feel pretty comfortable with that, with Ohio State being obviously the kicker and the one that you'd get the most juice out of. But I could definitely take a 3-game parlay of all money lines.
See, now we've got two completely disparate opinions here. Father David, I don't gamble, but if I did, I would hammer that over against Navy. We're hanging 60 on them. Okay, but what if
Father David, for not
Navy
betting,
scores 40?
You sure know the terminology of hammering the over.
That's right. And then D-Rock says first game Navy under 21. Again, like two completely different ends of the spectrum there. I mean, I think that opening the season should play a big factor for Notre Dame. But at the same time, I'm just scared by that 7-6 against the spread last year and the way that Navy game looked last year. So I'm just scared by that. 21 and a half, 3+ touchdowns is just too much after last year. Yeah. See, and Michael says Marcus Freeman's going to smash Navy due to this being the first game that is totally the Freeman era. Father David with an admission, hasn't always been a priest. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Peacock is going to exclusively stream an NFL playoff game in primetime this season.
It's a money grab that Peacock is going to exclusively stream a game this season. All they're making you do is sign up for a membership, just like they did with, airing that Notre Dame game on Peacock. They want people to rush over, sign up for their membership, and then forget about it and forget to cancel their membership, and then just keep, getting those reoccurring themes. Because, I mean, who wants to tune into Peacock? Who wants just to download, subscribe, get your free month trial or whatever, just so you can
Apparently
watch?
Not you.
So you could watch a game on, an NFL primetime game on Peacock. It's an overall money grab. They want to feel like they're contending with the big boys and that they're in the same league as everyone else. But the reality is they aren't, and they only get one game of the season. So I just think it's annoying. If you're going to do this, at least put like more than one game on Peacock. That way you have, a reason to maybe consistently use it. But when you only have one game, it's clear and obvious that you want people to come, forget about their membership, and then just keep getting these reoccurring fees from Peacock.
See, and this is going to be the key, what Derek says. He says 100% it's going to be a Cowboys game. They know Cowboys fans will buy it. And I'm really curious what game it ends up being, because I personally, if I've got, like, we've got the free version of the Peacock app, but the Notre Dame games, for example, you have to pay the subscription rate to watch the Notre Dame games on there. I'm assuming it's going to be the same for this NFL playoff game, even though in none of the articles that I've read does it actually say that. But I mean, why else would you be doing it if you're shelling out $110 million? You've got to get some money back. And how do you do it? With your subscription rate. If it's not my team, I can do without it. And it's going to be an 8:00 game. It's going to be the bookend of a doubleheader. NBC, the actual TV network, is going to have a 4:30 game. And this is going to be an 8:00 game at night. So if it's not my team, I can do without it. And I'm going to be really curious to see the kind of number that it does, though, because like the NFL is at least pretty happy with that Amazon deal that they did to put the Thursday night games on there, even though they only average 9.5 million viewers per game. You know, like they had a spike for that Chiefs Chargers to start off the season, and then it dipped, and the average ended up being 9.5 million. The biggest thing, though, that I saw was the median viewing age for the Amazon games was the youngest that the NFL has had in almost 10 years. And I think that that's what they're looking at. They want to get a younger audience, and putting these games on these streamers, they think is their way to do it. And at least like when you look at that Amazon thing, it paid off for them in that aspect. So, but the number is what's going to matter from both ends. What they end up, how many people actually end up, logging in, paying, and watching this thing. But I've just got a bad feeling. It's like, no, all these sports, none of them care about the actual viewer. They're just looking for more revenue streams. And, you've got to keep, it's not enough just to subscribe to cable. You got to get your ticket, and you've got to get this streaming package. You've got to get that streaming package. Everyone's got their hands out for something else. And that's Chi-Town. Us old guys have all the money, though. And that's right as well. Yeah, and that D-Rock says, I don't think Peacock has ever released any viewer numbers on the Notre Dame games. They haven't. And most of these streamers don't release numbers unless they are good. Like Amazon wasted no time with that Chiefs-Chargers game telling everyone what the numbers were last year. And as the season went on, there were less and less, fewer and fewer releases about what the ratings were for these games, because they were getting lower. And then at the end of the season, this 9.5 million was reported. You haven't heard the numbers on those Peacock games, because I think it's pretty safe to assume if the numbers were good on those Notre Dame Peacock games, you would have heard a number by now, but you haven't heard a number. So the Jets are going to host the Dolphins in the NFL. Speaking of more streaming games, Jets are going to host the Dolphins in the NFL's first Black Friday game the day after Thanksgiving. Jets apparently are interested in hosting that game every year. Do you buy or sell a permanent host for that game, like you have with the Lions and Cowboys on Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I do actually like the idea of adding kind of a consistent team to play, every Black Friday. I don't really have an issue with that. I think the only time I'd have an issue if it was the same two teams every year, because I think you can get enough variation of cycling in different teams in and out. But I think it'd be cool to have another team where it's like, okay, I know that the Jets are going to play every Black Friday, but it's it's going to change every year who they might play. And I think you guys talked about this recently. I am not a fan of what the NFL has done with the Thanksgiving and Christmas games this year, because they're all divisional matchups, and I don't like divisional matchups on special days like this. And as long as they stay away from that on the Black Friday, I would be cool with just about anything else. But I hate divisional matchups on holidays.
I do too. Like Lions Packers, I don't mind, I guess, because it's not my division, and at least by putting the Packers on there, you're expecting. I was about to say you're expecting a better game, but Aaron Rodgers isn't there anymore. I don't think, like personally, I don't think this Black Friday game needs a permanent host like that. Like, how about like how many years have the Jets been good in the last 50 or
Right.
60? Like, do you really want it to be the Jets every year, just like you've got the Lions on Thanksgiving Day? So you're tuning into the first half of the game, hoping it's a game, and then see what happens after that. I kind of like mixing it up a little bit. It would make some sense for it to be the Jets, though, because it is New York, so you have a big market and all that, big TV market and all that kind of stuff. But like we were talking about those matchups, what I found confusing, no, maybe not confusing, but like at least interesting, is the 49ers are playing on both Thanksgiving night and Christmas night. Like they're on both of those major holidays. One, I wouldn't want to play on both major holidays. Two, why do you have one team playing on both of those holidays? I think that they should be mixing. They're the only repeat team on both of those. I think that they should be mixing it up a little bit more myself.
Same.
So Dan Patrick says Dan Campbell is the most recognizable member of the Detroit Lions. My question, and this is actually a Dan Patrick poll question as well. I didn't see what any of the answers were. Which other teams is the head coach the first person that comes to mind when you think about those NFL teams?
Okay, so I have like one that's definite and two I feel pretty good about, and the third one's just kind of I think first and foremost, at least for me, when I think of the Rams, I think of Sean McVay, like off the top. And so
it's
that's
interesting because I feel the same. Like you can probably make a case for Aaron Donald or Matt Stafford, but McVay is still the first one I think of when I think
that's
of the Rams.
everyone every time you say the Rams. I don't know if it's just because he's young and just because of their prior Super Bowl and his outspokenness and his him talking about potentially leaving football already. So that was one for me. Two was Belichick and the Patriots.
Right.
And I say that just because Brady is gone. If Brady wasn't there,
right, and we're talking about like current team especially. Yeah, exactly. If Tom Brady was there, he'd be the first person, I think.
But right now, the current state of the Patriots, I think of Bill Belichick first and foremost. And then the last one for me, and I want to make sure I get the name right. It's the Dolphins coach,
Mike McDaniel.
Mike McDaniel. And again, that one is just because of just that's a lot of just this past season and seeing kind of the clips of him on the sideline, his interactions with Tua, like when he was like, yeah, I was up late last night watching all of your video, your high school or college tape. And like, that's just something that stuck with me. Right. Like and then like he was at one point he was like vaping on the sideline. He got caught with the vape. It's just like, I think of just him again, being another kind of younger coach, being kind of, up to more of like the antics, I guess I should say. But those are the three that really came to mind to me when you talk about you name a team. And this is, you kind of immediately think of the head coach.
Yeah. My first one was Belichick. Second one was McVay. And then my third one is, and I've seen someone else say this, the Pittsburgh Steelers. With Big Ben Roethlisberger being gone now, Mike Tomlin is really like, I don't know if I could name another player right now. I'm sure if I thought long and hard, I'd be, obviously Chase Claypool was traded from there last year. So I guess you got Kenny Pickett, but he's not exactly the face of the program. I think it's more Tomlin at this point. So the Steelers would be my third. My fourth is Pete Carroll. Like,
I like Pete too.
Like Pete Carroll, I guess I've got to say, the Seahawks. That would be my next one because if Russell Wilson was still there, he would be it. But with no Russell Wilson, I mean, you've got DK Metcalf. That's I just think
no more
Pete
Legion
Carroll.
of Boom.
Yeah, that's right. I think of Pete Carroll first, and Vrabel, as Tommy Guns is saying down there in Tennessee, is Derrick Henry. Is he still with Tennessee, or did they release him, or what exactly was going on with Derrick Henry? Do you know?
I'm not 100%.
He'd be the first one. Like if he's still there, he'd be the first one I think of. But I know that there was some talk about him changing teams. I don't know if it was like he's officially not there anymore, or like if he was kind of a Zeke Elliott kind of situation where they got rid of him. So
I think that he is getting close to kind of the end of his contract.
The legs
I think this is like a contract year for him. So it's like kind of like determining, do we go extension? Do we potentially do a trade and see what we can get out of it, knowing that he's on the back end of his running back life. But yeah, I think that's more so to do with it.
Right. DJ asks, who's Romlock Carrot? Spell it backwards, and that'll tell you. All right, a little basketball here at the end. Phoenix Suns fired Notre Dame alum Monty Williams as their head coach just 2 years after taking the Suns to the NBA Finals. And, of course, after just 4 seasons and leading a turnaround there, the Suns were horrible forever, and he got them to the NBA Finals in year 2. He's gone. Philly just fired Doc Rivers. The Bucks have already fired Mike Budenholzer. Nick Nurse has been fired in Toronto. 3 of those 4 guys, like most of the, all but Monty Williams has won championships. Did they deserve to get the boot? I guess is my question.
Yeah, so we'll start first with Monty Williams. In his first year, they were 34-39. That was the COVID year. They went on an 8-game winning streak to make the bubble. Didn't do much, but I mean that, like you said, that was coming off a 19-63 season before. So you kind of throw out the bubble year. It's the first year, whatever. So his first year, non-bubble year, they lose in the NBA Finals after going 51-21. Right? He's NBA Coach of the Year runner-up. The next year, they win the West, go 64-18, have the best record in basketball. He wins, Coach of the Year, and then obviously this year they go out in the quarterfinals. But no, Monty Williams should not be fired. I mean, he led a team to the championship not 2 years ago and lost to the Giannis and the Bucks, coached by Mike Budenholzer, who also got the boot. He shouldn't have got the boot. He just recently was removed from a championship. Giannis dealt with injuries in the playoffs. Mike Budenholzer's brother also passed away during the playoffs. I just think those 2 guys definitely did not deserve to get fired. I do think that Doc Rivers deserved to get the boot. And Doc Rivers is a really solid coach, but that's really all he is. He can't go to the next level. And in a lot of his game 7s,
he's won a championship, though. I mean, I realize he's a few years removed from it, but he's won a championship before.
I'm just saying, I don't think Monty Williams deserved to get the boot. And I think the only reason he got the boot is because there's a change in ownership. And I think that the new owner kind of wants a new coach to go along with his lineage, essentially.
Apparently that Ishbia guy, or however you say it, he just decided he didn't like Monty Williams. And I think that Philly would be a pretty good situation.
You took my exact words. I said I was going to say, don't be surprised if Monty Williams ends up in Philadelphia this next season.
Yeah, that would make sense. Like after the rebuild and what he did there in Phoenix, it feels like Philly is a team that he could get to the next level, like get them over that hump as close as they were this year. And it's just crazy, like to go from only 4 years, but like you said, new owner and all that. I'm not completely shocked about Doc Rivers because it's a player-driven league, and that's really what it comes down to. These coaches, so many of them just become disposable, and it's amazing. Like you got on the resumes, and these guys all have championships, but they're being shown the door because, like the Budenholzer thing. Like, wasn't there talk a couple of years ago before they won the championship? Like, if he didn't win it, he might have been gone at that point.
Well, and I've heard a lot of stuff too that Darvin Ham, the now coach of the Lakers, was very kind of a prominent role in that championship season. And not having him, and then Budenholzer not kind of living up to expectations or continuing expectations was ultimately kind of the recipe for him. But it's just like you said, it's just so unfortunate that these guys can go from winning a championship. They can go from winning Coach of the Year, and literally a year or 2 removed, they're already getting the boot. And there are so many teams in this league that would love to have a head coach of Monty Williams, that would love to have Doc Rivers, that would love to have Mike Budenholzer, that would love to have Nick Nurse. Like, all these guys are great coaches. And I just sadly think that's kind of the realm of professional sports. And that's just outside of, that's not just the NBA. It's the NFL. It's the MLB. Is a lot of these guys are just recycled around, it's just kind of a matter of where you fit now. Do you agree with the new ownership? Do you agree with the player personnel that's on the court, et cetera, et cetera? So I think all these guys won't have a hard time finding a new job at the end of the day either.
Yeah, I agree. But like I saw Kendrick Perkins, kind of lamenting, saying, the players are soft and all this stuff with all the coaching changes and all this different stuff. But look, I mean, this is nothing new. Like Magic Johnson wanted a coaching change. He got one. Michael Jordan, depending on who you want to believe, with like the Doug Collins situation, like he wanted a coaching change. He got one. Kobe Bryant, there was a point with him as well. So it's not like this stuff hasn't happened in the past, and it's been going on for a long time because it's a player-driven league.
I'll even go out on a limb. I think DeAndre Ayton is a large reason why Monty Williams kind of got fired as well. I don't think he's living up to what he needs to be. And I feel like that organization feels like a coach should be able to get more out of DeAndre Ayton. But that's just me. That's my thoughts.
Yeah. What do you think about the Embiid comments after their Game 7 loss to the Celtics, talking about he and James Harden can't win it all themselves?
I think that's not a good look for Joel Embiid, and I'll specifically for this reason. Joel Embiid is the MVP, that meaning you are the best player in the league. You are obviously the best player on your roster. You combine that with someone like James Harden, who had an all NBA caliber season. I mean, there's no reason that two stars can't drive the majority of an NBA team. I mean, look what Kawhi Leonard did the year he won with the Raptors. He was the main guy of that show and was able to do a lot. So I just think it's a really bold statement to come out and say, as your first time winning the MVP, that you are now kind of offloading the blame to other people, saying that you don't have enough. But I mean, you're the MVP of the league. You should be able, as the MVP, to put together a strong performance. And I get that you have to have pieces around you and the roster needs to be complete, but I don't think that that should be the first thing coming out of your mouth when you lose as the MVP.
Yeah, I completely agree. The guy just won the MVP. Harden won the MVP 5 years ago. You've got two players of that caliber. You should be able to go farther. And Decaf not hot on the NBA. He says it's horrible TV. I completely disagree. I've swung a long way on this over the last few years. I think especially NBA playoffs is so much better. Like the quality of play is so much better. Like March Madness is more exciting because of the one and done nature and upsets and all that kind of stuff. But
if you're looking
the
at the
actual
art of basketball,
the fundamentals of basketball, the fundamentals in these games is so much better than what you're seeing in college right now. And I blame what's going on in college, the lack of those fundamentals, on the one and done, as well as the transfer portal and guys moving around. You don't have guys and teams playing together as much. And so you've lost a lot of the fundamentals. There's a lot more turnovers. It's a lot sloppier basketball. I think playoff NBA basketball is actually,
as much as you want to
pretty good quality.
Potentially hate it, that Lakers and Warriors series was tremendous. Just the games every night, even though they started late, just the back and forth, the big shot after big shot. I mean, there's a reason why. I saw it today. That that Lakers and Warriors series is the most watched playoff series in over 20 years in the NBA. And that just kind of came out, but it's just, to me, it's good to see. I'd say my number one gripe with the NBA is that there's just no sense of guys just flop around too much. There's too much like jumping to different rosters. Like Kevin Durant has been on like what feels like 5 different rosters in the last 3 years. I think that would be my only complaint, is guys don't stick it to their long-term contracts. But that's just my opinion on that. But overall, just the when we get down to it, the playoffs and the games themselves, there's just so much skill in the NBA right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. D-Rock says, before exiting, probably one or two shows where you can step in late to the program and you don't have to play catch up with the discussions. Chat. Thanks, gentlemen. Thank you very much, D-Rock. We do appreciate it, and we appreciate all our listeners / viewers. Appreciate you having us. And, Decaf, NBA hasn't been good since Jordan played. Obviously, that is a very subjective take. I mean, I definitely watched more NBA during the that Jordan period in the 90s, probably because I was in college and like for a lot of it didn't have as much to do at that point. But again, like I think the game has
hearing
changed.
you say that you watch the NBA is such a big thing, because it's just not that you didn't like the NBA, it's just you never watched. And so now when I hear that you're like, yeah, I tuned in and watched this game, I'm like, who are you? Who is this person?
Who is this guy? This wasn't happening when I lived in that house. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Thanks as always. Again, we do appreciate it, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Jesse, I will talk to you later in the week as well. We'll talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.